Welcome to the Fruitful Fertility Co. podcast, your holistic, faith-filled, no-fluff guide to getting pregnant naturally. I'm your host and TTC BFF, Tori Black, here to pull you out of your weariness and cheer you into God's calling to be a mother, all while giving you the simple, bite-sized steps to improve your fertility. Let's trade stress and overwhelm for hope, because girl, you look fertile to me. Okay, guys, we have a very special guest today. We have Dina Previti with us, who is a counselor in Philly, and she is so incredible, and I'm so excited to have her on here. She's going to speak to us about a topic. We're going to talk about grief. It's not the funnest topic, but I think if we can really sink in and absorb these words that Dina has for us, that it's going to help us as we go along this journey. And so, yeah, Dina, thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about you and your practice and what you do.
Thanks for having me, Tori. I love your headphones. You're so professional. Like the real deal. So I'm a counselor outside of Philadelphia, born and raised in Jersey, and I've been practicing and counseling for almost 20 years now. So actually more than 20 years. I opened a practice when I was 25, and I counseled before that, by the way. I'm not that old. And so it just was something that God pushed me right into. All my friends when I was younger told me their problems, and my family would say, how come everyone's telling you all their problems? There's so much drama around you. And I said, I don't know. I just listen and I ask questions. So I waitressed all through college and grad school and had regulars, and people would sit down and tell me their whole story.
Yeah.
And I love that. So eventually Jesus said, why don't you just get paid for it? So I went to school and got the degrees, and here we are. So I've been counseling ever since, and I do counseling in different capacities, and I do a couple other jobs as well, and love diversifying what I do in my day. But ultimately, I always end up sitting talking with people.
I love that. My husband, I'm the same way. I have whatever, we have that same thing where people just come to you and tell you like all their business and all their problems right off the bat. And even my husband has joked about that. I'll be like, yeah, I just met this girl and she just told, and I'll give him the whole spiel of what she just told me. And he's like, people just do that to you, don't they? They just tell you their whole life story. I'm like, they do. They really do.
Yeah, it's amazing that you're gifted in that, Tori. People also are lonely. They want to have someone listen to them. So many interviews that are done on Instagram and Facebook now. It's like just people on the streets chatting with others. People just want to chat. They want to be known. And I love listening. So that's sort of the basis of how I ended up here. And then I formalized it and opened a practice in my town. And yeah, I love it.
That's really great. Before we started recording, you were telling me a little bit about it being a biblical, like your training was, what did you call it?
Biblical counseling. So I went to
Biblical counseling.
seminary.
Hmm.
I became a Christian when I was 18, and Jesus saved my life. Literally, I was on the path to nowhere and would not have been useful at all for him or his kingdom. And so I'm grateful for that. And then turns out I figured out that I was created to counsel. That was the calling on my life. And so I was, like I said, going to do it in any capacity, whether I was paid or not. And then I asked everyone I knew, what should I be when I grew up? And everyone said the same thing. I was like, oh my goodness, I guess that's what I need to do. I wanted to be a photographer, which I love photography, but guess what? Everyone's a photographer. Everyone has a phone that's better than any, SLR camera that I ever had. So that's how I ended up in counseling. And the biblical counseling piece just made sense to me because I wanted to go to the root of the problem. And that actually doesn't have to be biblical necessarily. You might want to call it like motivational behavioral therapy, for instance. The root is what you're motivated by. What do you want? What do you want that will drive your behavior? So it changes people from the inside out instead of the reverse. Like if you just rearrange, the symptoms, what's going to happen? The root is still going to grow and produce whatever weed it might be. So if you, chop off bad fruit,
You were
going to grow the bad fruit, right?
you were speaking my
So
language.
that was in scripture. That was in Luke 6. Out of the good root comes good fruit. Out of the bad root comes bad fruit. Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Luke 6. So Matthew 12. So that's where I found myself at home, partially because my own issues. I had so many of my own issues. A lot of people say, are you a counselor because you went to so much therapy growing up? And I said, no, that's like the last place I wanted to be. But God had to clean up my life in order to make me useful. He needed to clean up my mouth and my thinking and all the things that, no one would have sat with me then and wanted counsel for me. But I sort of found home from my own professors who confessed their struggles from the front of our, theater of when they were
Yes.
teaching in grad school. And so then I do cognitive behavioral therapy, and a lot of my clients don't share my faith. I opened a practice in the center of our town. I'm in Wayne, Pennsylvania. I did that on purpose because I want to be able to have a ministry. I want to be able to say, I can help you even if you don't have the same faith. So I've had people of all faiths that come to me and they don't even know I'm a believer. Even though it's written in my paperwork, I explain it, directly and explicitly. I'm holistic. So wherever they're coming from is how I'm going to respond. So it just really depends on them. If they're Christians and they want biblical counseling, I pray with them and we talk about scripture. If not, I'm sort of covert, like Ephesians 4, 15, speak the truth in love, right? To be kind and honest is a good principle. It's a biblical principle, but it's still helpful in conflict resolution.
Yeah.
If you're an atheist, I can still say, can you be kind and honest? And they like that, because it's helpful. It's true. So um, that's my mindset.
Yeah, I love that. That my concept for fertility is a root cause approach. And like you said, you can change the symptoms, but if you don't change the root, the problem's still there. And it's kind of the same in my practice. It's we're working on the root cause because so often my women they go to the doctor and they're given medication or whatever that kind of masks the symptoms. And I'm like, okay, but what's causing the problem in the first place? So I love that that's how your counseling practice works because I think that root cause approach to anything is the right approach. Like, let's not just mask it with a band-aid. Let's fix it. Let's clean it up. Let's get it out. Let's surrender it to God and get it taken care of. So I love that. I love it so much. Let's dive into our topic for today, which is grief. So let's break down this concept of grief. So a lot of my women, they experience grief through miscarriages. They experience grief through time missed. So maybe they're a certain age and they thought they would have had kids younger. They experience grief through pregnancy announcements, seeing everybody else get pregnant. So what is something about grief many people don't typically understand? Or yeah, let's just dive into just the topic in general.
Sure. So grief can be complicated. I actually call it that to my clients, right? You can have what would be sort of a simple grief. It doesn't mean it's not hard, but it's simple in the sense of someone passes away. Like my grandmother, when she passed away, she was 89 years old and was ready to go see Jesus. And she said, I'm out, and was gone in a week. We missed her like crazy, but that wasn't complicated. She died of essentially old age, right? Versus, a third trimester pregnancy that is lost. It's like that's massively complicated now. So complicated grief creates a lot of confusion. Grief alone is hard enough. We're not actually created to grieve. I don't think we weren't actually meant to have loss in the Garden of
Interesting.
Eden. There was
Yeah.
no loss. It was perfect. When God created humans, they were perfect, right? Perfectly together. He said, okay, it's not good for man to be alone. So loneliness, introduction of loneliness was just with Adam, where arguably that's an image bearing quality. God himself is the Trinity. So he's relational. Potentially loneliness is something that God doesn't like, right? So he
Mm,
made Eve. No issues. Perfect. Not meant to have loss, not meant to have sadness. And then insert sin, insert Satan, insert the dark world, and loss, is created. And you see that with the first children born, there's loss. So we're not meant for it. And some people can handle it better than others, right? Everyone has different coping mechanisms. Some people have mental toughness that others don't. Some people are more sensitive. But a shattered dream is always going to leave someone grieving. Whatever the dream is, if your dream is shattered and broken, you're going to grieve. That's the natural human response. It's not comfortable. It's not easy. And Americans aren't good at it, I would say, by and large. We're not a grieving culture. A lot of my clients will say, I don't have time for grief, which is true. It's interruptive. It's annoying. It's like, I don't want to cry. They'll say, I don't want to cry. They won't touch the tissues. There's tears streaming down their face. They don't want to touch the tissues because, like, no, I'm not crying. I'm fine. but it's okay to cry. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to take time. So your question, people might not understand that it's complicated. Grief is often layered, right? There's a lot there. Like Shrek says, it's an onion, like
Yes.
ogres have layers. It's like, that's how grief is. It's so slow down, let yourself work through, what am I feeling? What's hard? What's the loss? What do I do with that?
Yeah, work through each layer at a time. I like that. And I like too about the loneliness piece that you point out because I find that a lot of my clients, they feel very isolated because sometimes they're keeping their fertility story a secret. They don't want everybody to know because different reasons. They don't want people to feel sorry for them. They don't want people to act differently around them. And some people I think have shame around it too. They feel broken and that something's wrong with them. And so they just don't want to share that. And that's one thing I talk a lot. And even in this, I'm working on a new program, but in this program, we're going to have community because I feel like it's so important to have community so that you're not lonely because I feel like that grief festers in loneliness. It's like you in talk exactly what you said. You have these layers, but it's hard to work through these layers if you can't even get through the first one because you don't have any help or any fellowship or any community aspect to it. So I love that layered approach. That's interesting. I hadn't ever really thought of grief that way, but it is like there's different layers to it. That's
I was
good.
talking to someone today actually who said, I need to work through my anger. And so that was the conversation. And they mentioned it back to a historical experience that they had, which seemingly was unrelated to anything in their current life, which they were aware of. Like, I don't know why, but this moment in time is really bothering me. Okay, so then we talked through that. 20 minutes later, we realized that actually all of that stems from a huge loss back in their early 20s. Like 15 years later, all these layers, right? It wasn't obvious to them, but as we continue to talk it through, right, in community, right, conversation, here's how I'm feeling, there were like these epiphanies that went off and they were like, oh my goodness, it's actually from the grief. And then the tears came because suddenly it was like, that's what it was. And it
Mm-hmm.
unlocked the reality of, this is sad to me, I'm really still sad about this. And then my next statement to them was, well, let's go there, let's talk through that in our next few conversations. So it's complicated.
It is. And I feel like if you don't root it out, and this will kind of lead us into our next question, but I feel like what I'm seeing from my end as a fertility, coach and nurse is that when we don't work through that grief and we let it fester, it actually physically makes us sick. And I think there's a lot of especially in my niche, which is unexplained infertility, a lot of times I think it's just unprocessed trauma. It's unprocessed grief. It's things. So it's like they get on this call and they think I'm going to ask about like hormones and their period and medications, and I do. But then I'm like, all right, tell me about your childhood. Did you experience any trauma in your house in your childhood? Where are you in your sibling lineup? What's your relationships with your parents like? I ask all these questions, and most people are really receptive to it just because before they start working with me, they know I've already kind of explained that. Like I'm going to get in your business and we're going to dig into stuff you haven't dug into before. But yeah, I feel like that's just yeah, so good. We
That's what
gotta
makes
root
you
it out.
great at what you do, because you're actually willing to take the time and understand a person. And I think a lot of times stress affects, I mean, I know we're talking about grief, but stress affects a person's ability to get pregnant. I've had clients where that's one of the presenting issues they come in with. I can't get pregnant, I'm struggling. And I'm glad they come, because then they're willing to talk. And one person, I said years ago, you have such a great amount of stress in your life, and everything you're doing to try to get pregnant is so regimented, which creates another layer of stress. I think you're not doing anything wrong, but let's work through the stress. And as soon, it probably was 6 months, and I said, I can't put a timeline on it, but if we can work it through, let's see what happens. Boom, pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Just was worked through. So it was not always formulaic like that, but
Mm-hmm.
in that situation for her it was, which was sweet to see.
Mm-hmm.
But that you're willing to get in their story, Tori, is like powerful. I'm sure that's what makes your efficacy rates high.
Yeah,
Your
yeah,
clients
I
are
think
like, yeah, we're
so.
having a baby.
Yes, I think so because I feel like it's not we're again not putting a band-aid on anything. We're rooting it out, and that really is like my whole perspective is a faith-filled, faith-aligned mineral balancing, but really the minerals, the lack of minerals is from stress. Like it always comes down to the nervous system. It always comes down to stress. So with that in mind, how can these women, these couples support themselves when they feel stuck in grief? Like what is something they can do during this, like as they're working through these layers of grief,
Mhm.
besides work with someone like you, which would be highly, highly recommended.
Well, I'm sort of like a last resort, right? But I I love it if you don't have to come to me, truly. I mean, my
Yeah.
job's working myself out of a job. So the first thing I would encourage a couple, I mean, if you're not single, right? If you're married and working this through, then your spouse. It's really important that you and your spouse start talking about how you feel. I can't tell you, Tori, how many people have said to me, I didn't tell my partner this. They're telling me before them, right? They're
Mhm.
they're not communicating with each other. Grief is experienced differently based on every person. Every person has their own unique story of how they grieve. And they may grieve one loss very differently than the next loss. And it's the same person. So it's somewhat unpredictable. I know a couple years ago lost a baby full term, but it was a terrible, tragic loss. I mean, they knew it was happening, but still was tragedy. And they had a strong faith. She processed her grief and loss through art, essentially, through artistic renderings, through paintings, through doing her own art, but more so even just visually. Like she would collect things that were beautiful and symbolic, and it could be metal art or jewelry or photographs, and that's how she grieved visually. She's a very image conscious person. Her husband, the exact opposite. He wrote everything down, everything he felt, everything he experienced. He wrote it down in his journal. That's two very different ways to process. How do you have a conversation? Neither of them, those ways of coping, are conversational, right? So it takes a lot of intentionality. And sometimes you don't want to talk when you're sad. You don't want to talk about your sadness. If you're having a good day or a good moment, you don't want to bring up the sadness because I'm doing well, right? So the first rule of thumb is talk to each other about what you're feeling, how you're doing, check in, do check ins, and do it regularly. Initially, as soon as like the initial grief happens, the loss, over time, you could lengthen the time in between. But firstly, check in. Secondly, try to learn each other's language in it. Don't assume that your spouse is going to process the way you are. I mean, if I'm talking to women, don't assume your husband's going to understand where you're coming from. I think that's important to ask them. How are you grieving? What does grief look like to you? That sounds like a counseling question, but it's actually not. Just try to understand the person. It's like specific. Thirdly, the woman's going to process a loss of a baby differently than a man when she's carried the baby, right? There's a personal connection that the man doesn't have. I mean, so many times a man feels more connected to his child when the baby is 6 months, sometimes a year and a half, right? When the baby's mobile and
Hmm.
interactive and knows their daddy and says dada dada first, that is really oftentimes when a relationship with a father and a child takes off. I mean, I'm not saying it's all the time that way, but from the woman's point of view, her body might feel the difference 6 weeks in, it could
Hmm.
be 8 weeks in, from conception. So her pathway of relationship with her baby has gone on longer. And so the grief will be greater in a sense. It could be. So just be aware that it might be a different journey in that sense. Um, so I think those are sort of three practical initial things just with the couple. Beyond that, get support for sure. I mean, when it's a traumatic loss, I typically encourage people to tell like 3 to 5 people, right? If it's not a huge public, something that the public's hugely aware of, and you have that choice to be able to pick and choose, more than five gets to be complicated where people are constantly asking questions or you have to feel like you have to update people, right? Less than three is hard because what if they're not available, or what if their counsel is different than what you'd want to hear? Sort of makes a variety of help, but that's sort of a minimum, I would say, is 3 people should know what you're facing. Ideally, it's another couple, it's a family that cares, it's pastor, and then counseling typically you have to pay for. So that's why I say it's a last resort. If you can just lean on your your actual friends and family, your life system of relationships. That's best case scenario, because they're the ones that can make you meals, and they're the ones that can send you cards and flowers and stop by and give you a hug. That personalization is really powerful in grief. Someone who knows you well, who can just sit there with you in silence and say nothing. That's different than a counseling appointment.
Yeah.
There's power in that. So close friends, family that function like close friends, I think are very healing.
Yeah, that's a very, I love that. I love tangible tips. I'm all about some tangible tips. So all of those are so good. And specifically that, tell 3 to 5 people. I think that's so good because it's like some women and some couples, don't want, they don't want to tell everybody their business. Like me and my husband, we joke about that, how different we are. Like my husband would keep all his information, all his business to himself, not tell anybody anything. I would tell everybody anything they want to know, like absolutely anything. I'm an
Put it
open
on the
book.
internet.
Yeah, yeah. And so even having that tangible, like no matter what your personality type is, when you're working through grief, telling 3 to 5 people is the sweet spot. Because like you said, then you don't have to update people. You don't have to make a Facebook post about it, but you have enough community and people that love you to check in on you and help you process those layers of grief you're going to go through. So that's so tangible. I really like that.
Well,
And
some
I
people, they have like a caring bridge, the website where it's on full blast because the community is aware and they're carrying your burdens with you, right? They
Mhm.
prayed for you, they are sending you meals, or it's public, right? That's different where you're updating one website and it goes out to everybody. But when it's not like that, that's less common, I would say. Also understand that you might have to teach people how to support you in your grief process. Why I say that is time after time after time, Tori, my clients will say to me, and my friends will say, that was so unhelpful what they said. That was so unhelpful. And I'll say, what? They gave you like unsolicited counsel? And they're like, yes, absolutely. And yeah, there's a ton of counselors out there. Right. So sometimes they have to slow down and teach people what they actually need, which of course, who has energy to do that when you're tired and you're sad and you're
Right.
grieving. But it does help because then you can explain to them, especially within spouses, to be able to explain. Again, that's what I said, to make sure you learn each other's language. That's part of that, is saying, actually, it's not helpful for you to give me all this advice, or I don't need another book.
Yeah.
Right? Like, please don't buy me a book on what to do, or
Yeah.
send me a website. It's like, I just need you to come over and sit on the couch with me and let's like eat all the ice cream, like every ice
Yes.
cream. Like, for me, I love cheese. Like, okay, let's just bring
Me
me
too.
cheese, and
Mm-hmm.
let's just hang out. You don't have to fix it, you don't have to solve it, right? So for people that are grieving, expect that you might have to help people understand what's helpful for you, and try not to lose the friendships that when they say things they shouldn't, like, don't try not to cut them off eternally. It's helpful to have a little grace for people that don't know how to grieve well. Again, Americans don't grieve well. We wrap up funerals in 2 weeks and then back to normal life, which is not enough time ever to process any loss. Even if it's a simple loss that happened in old age and you knew it was coming, it's still hard. So it give people the grace to say, you know what, that's not actually helpful, and try not to cut the friendship off forever. Circle back at some point and say, when you said that, it really hurt me, but I love you enough to share it with you, and we're going to keep going.
That's a good way to phrase it because I do feel like in the fertility space, there like it's almost this. I mean, it's not funny, but it's like laugh to keep from crying, of all the things people say to couples that are struggling to get pregnant that is not helpful. Like, oh, just relax. Oh, you just need to have a beer. Oh, you just need to go on vacation. Quit thinking about it. Quit stressing about it. Like the unsolicited, unhelpful advice and the like for couples that are struggling to conceive is just enormous. But if we had and even had that sentence ready, like, hey, when you say that, this is why it's not helpful for me, and I love you, and it's okay, we'll keep moving forward. I think having sometimes these like pre-decided responses is really beneficial for stress because we're talking about grief and stress being connected, but if we let our emotions take us instead of pre-deciding how we're going to react to something. So I go to family Christmas and Aunt Betty says, "Oh, you need to just quit stressing about it and go on vacation and get drunk." And I can either emotionally spiral Or I can just say, you know what, Aunt Betty, that's really not helpful. I know you're trying. Thank you. I love you, but that's really not helpful. And then just move on with my night and try to enjoy it. So I think just having those tools, yeah, like like you said, letting people know how to support you instead of letting it create more grief that they don't understand you. That's a really great tip. I love that. What about if the grief is, so for some of these women, it is miscarriages, and the other is just that they've never been pregnant. I would even venture to say that the majority, like almost 75, 80% of my people have never been pregnant. So they're not grieving an actual person or baby, but the fact that they just they've missed it. They feel like, they're in their late 30s, or they're wondering if they're ever going to get pregnant, and they're just watching everybody else get pregnant. Is grief a little bit like, because I feel like those tips still work perfect for those. But would you say there's anything different for something that has happened and something that you feel like you missed out on?
I think it's a little different. There's some similarities and overlap, but one significant difference, Tori, is it's the death of a dream. So it's also similar to somebody maybe less of a scale that had wanted a certain amount of children and don't have that many,
Hmm.
right? Like that's they often can look at it and say, well, at least I have, this many, but someone who wanted children desperately and has never had them, it's the death of the dream because the dream, how long back does that dream go? Some little girls,
Yes.
want to be a mommy from the time they are 2 and 3 and 4 years old. So some in their 20s decide, oh yeah, I think I want kids, and then it just doesn't happen. So everyone's different in that sense, but the death of the dream means you're going to have to grieve that death in a sense, the loss of that dream, because the dream is unfulfilled. And when God's in the picture, he's sovereign. And then the question is, well, why is he allowing that? That's what everyone
Hmm.
asks. Anything hard happens, why does God allow it? Right. And again, that answer is also complicated. There's no platitude to like slap onto scripture and oh, you feel better. It's not how that works. We're human and we're delicate. So there's a lot there. The story of how you ended up there is something I think worth pursuing and exploring and sharing, right? Like with close friends, family, spouse, counselor. You didn't just wake up and not have a baby, right? It's like there's so much to it. What is their story? I think that's important for them to flesh out with a person. Like sit with someone and share your story.
Hmm.
Help other people, let other people in so that they can understand what happened. Um, Oftentimes you see the hand of God when you share your story. Where was he in each of these moments? Where was I? What decisions did I make that put me here?
Yeah.
We blame God when bad things happen or when things we perceive to be bad happen. But I'm also a part of all this, right? I'm in my own story. I'm making choices every single day. So that's a part of it. And I mean, ultimately, you're in good company, I would say, to encourage you. A lot of women in scripture didn't have babies, and a lot of women in scripture became mothers to people that weren't their actual children,
Hmm.
right? So there's room for that. Also, I have many people in my family that were adopted, cousins that were adopted, and I have friends that have adopted babies, and that's always another layer of, doesn't change the grief and the loss, but it can give you hope. It can give you motherhood. It can give you a family. There's dreams that can be fulfilled, although not traditionally, like not the traditional course. But you see God when he like rescued the Egyptians, the Israels from Egypt, not the Egyptians, the Israelites, his people, right, from Egypt, from slavery. And he took them the long way home, all the way through the desert, 400 years. It's like, yeah, that was unconventional. That was probably not what they had wanted. But what if it was best for them, right? Like,
Hmm.
what if somehow adopting children is God's best plan for you and you adopt and suddenly you're like, I love this. Like you're not going to know that until you're in it, right?
Hmm.
Like that's not the dream you had for your life, but maybe somehow it's better.
Yeah.
Like that's not something I'm going to say to someone who has just found this out that they're not going to have a baby.
Mm.
Timing is everything. It always matters timing. Proverbs talks about that. The timing of your words matter.
Yeah.
But I think first I would just want to say, tell me your story. What happened? And um, also, how could God comfort them in the loss? Right? He understands that their
Yeah.
dreams aren't going to come true in the way that they had hoped. And where is He in that? And what good does He offer them in that? And that again is going to probably be a longer conversation that grief hits in waves, Tori. It's like if you're standing at the shore, I always say this. I'm from Jersey. We go to Jersey Shore all the time. I was just there last week. So if you're standing at the waves and the wave comes up and hits your bare feet, right? You can feel it trickle on your legs. And sometimes grief just feels like that. Like it's just there, sort of underlying. My eyes might tear up, maybe not, right? And then other times waves come and just crash over you and knock you over.
Mm-hmm.
Like what just happened? This huge barrage of grief for 24 hours or a couple days. Interestingly, grief always moves forward, just like the waves. It comes in and out, right? Grief is, you're never going to grieve for a lifetime in a sense, because what happens is your mind wanders. Your mind wanders. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I'm thirsty. Oh, that song's on. Oh, look at that butterfly. It's like the flitting around of your own brain actually takes you off of the fixation of the sorrow. And it's in those moments that you typically can find God's goodness, because it's like, oh, there's other things he's doing. There's other perspective that I can
Mm-hmm.
have, right? And it doesn't take away the sadness and the loss, but it helps to counterbalance it a bit. Like, okay, there is good in the world.
Yeah.
God does love me, right? It's like those conversations start to infuse the grief and pull you out of it slowly.
Yeah, that's really good. I tell my women, I feel like in the medical world, they're constantly told like how low their chances of getting pregnant are. And so my approach is the opposite of like, God created you to have babies and to be fruitful and multiply. And I'm here to encourage you that you can get pregnant, that this is God's will for your life. But we also know that God has bigger plans than any of us can ask or imagine. And so I like to think of it as, have you seen that picture where the kid is holding the little teddy bear and it's Jesus kneeling down with the huge teddy bear behind its back? I think about that picture so often that I do believe that these women are capable of getting pregnant, that they have the ability to, even if modern medicine has kind of knocked them down. But even if, he's still good, and even if he does have different plans for you, if you can be open-handed to it, like work, like you said, like we're going to get help process our grief in healthy ways and know that it's going to be this wave that keeps coming up and touching our feet. But that if, as long as we're open-handed, we can still have this beautiful life that's maybe even more beautiful than we imagined, even if it's unconventional and it doesn't happen the way we expected it to. It's just being open-handed to the God who knows way more than we do.
And
So
we're
that's,
really
yeah.
not created for this earth. That's another piece
Mm,
this to zoom out and understand. Like our dreams for our lives as humans are probably written on our heart from the time we were born, and at least from the time we're little. And they're good and they're beautiful and they're powerful and important, but they're not everything, because we're really created for the next life. And so that sorrow points towards, we're not meant to be here, right?
mm-hmm.
Again, we're not meant to grieve. We weren't created for it. So we'll be there for eternity, generations upon generations upon generations of time, right? Like, and it will be full of joy and real food and like cheese, a lot of cheese, like like ice cream and all the things you enjoy, and work and beauty and flowers and sunshine and the ocean and all sorts of things, like recognizable relationships that we make on earth will be with us for eternity. So I also encourage women to think like that. Like try to have your mind bounce to eternity once in a while. It may not stick, but if you can bounce over to that realm and think like, okay, you know what, my life, I really had a picture of like I wanted this big house in the suburbs with a fence and a couple puppy dogs and four kids, two boys, two girls, and all within 10 years, and like this tied up with a bow. It's like there's sorrow in every generation of struggle. Like there's a loss in every generation. Is everyone ever content? No, it's like you have this picture of I want it to look like this and it doesn't. Well, maybe someday it will, right? In the next earth. The other thought I have, a friend of mine got pregnant at 44 and completely naturally, and she had tried for years and couldn't get pregnant, and she got pregnant twice um, with IVF with help and had her babies. And then that was it. She's like, okay, that's my family. Thank you, Lord, that you gave me my family this way. And then gets pregnant naturally. It's like, you just never know. You
mm-hmm.
just truly, like you said, you don't know God's plan, right? So
Mm-hmm.
my tagline for my counseling practice is there is always hope. There is always hope. You don't know what God's up to. So I also want to encourage people to remember that although grief and sorrow is hard, and there's a certain part of that that includes acceptance of reality, you serve a supernatural, miraculous God who
Mm-hmm.
does amazing and crazy things that you don't know when he'll do it. So
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with expecting and hoping that
Yes.
he'll do something amazing.
Yeah, that I'm like making all these notes over here on my piece of paper, but like I wrote that and underlined it. Like there is always hope. And that is one of my like, yes, my practice is about helping women understand their fertility and ultimately helping them get pregnant. That is what I am trying to do. But my very favorite feedback that I get or testimonials that I get are the women that are like, I just feel hope again. I feel hopeful again because it's like life has been kicking them, the medical system's been kicking them, their doctors are cold, the waiting rooms are, just sterile and like there's no love in it, and then they come in with me in this space and it's like I actually feel hopeful. I feel like I'm allowed to hope again. I'm like, yes, there is always hope. Like you are capable of this. So I'm like, yeah, there is always hope. Underline, underline, underline. It's so good. What about let's talk about one thing that I talk about again, and I mentioned this earlier, was that, grief, sadness, stress, trauma can create physical sickness within our body. And there's, the book, the Body Keeps the Score that talks about this. But how does unprocessed grief show up in the body or in daily life? And we kind of talked about some healthy ways to release that, but like do you see this show up in people? Do you ever see patterns? I mean, obviously here on this is a fertility podcast. I see it in fertility, but do you see it in your clients too, that there's some kind of maybe unexplained physical thing that goes with it?
Sure. Yeah, I think you're totally right. So again, it would depend if there's a trauma component to the grief, because that is where you enter the book, the trauma, the body
Mm-hmm.
keeps the score. Sorry, that is a powerful book, right? Essentially, it's saying that your body holds on to the trauma that you experience in your life, the emotional trauma, psychological, spiritual trauma. Your body physiologically holds on to it, and so it needs to be released, right? There needs to be healing, and there's multiple ways to do that. But I think just again acknowledge that your ailments might be a result of unprocessed grief.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of the umbrella thought. And then what do you do with that is get help,
Mm-hmm.
which, we were talking about earlier, like unprocessed trauma can cause low frequencies,
Yes.
actually, body scientifically. Everybody has a frequency, right? God spoke the earth into existence and he spoke a vibrational, measurable frequency into the earth. And so as a result, we're assigned a frequency, and a corpse has a frequency. It's just incredibly low.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with negative relationships, when you're dealing with a lot of negative emotions, your frequencies are lower. So to be able to boost your frequencies is important. It helps fight your immune system, fight off sickness, ailments, right?
Yeah.
Toxicity. So that's like a holistic approach in general. But then when it comes to feeling like you're going through this trauma and now I'm sick, like, well, you might have, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which one do you deal with first? Well, ideally both. I mean, take frequency, right? What we take,
Yep.
this daily drink, take that because it's a quick fix. Americans are looking for a quick fix, and it, it's a quick fix in that it starts working immediately. Will you feel the results immediately? Some people do, some people don't. But it's this just morning drink that is minerals that boost our frequency and help us feel better. So start there, something easy, and that you can do yourself. That you don't need a prescription, you don't need insurance. It's
Mm-hmm.
affordable. Of course, you can consult with your doctor, and I recommend that. But do your own research. But try the. I mean, Tori, you can share more about that. But
Yeah.
try the product that we take because it's natural and it's incredibly healing. Additionally, I think when it comes to your body holding on to things, what we said earlier, talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about it with someone you trust. Talk about it with someone that can hear you. Talk about it with Jesus himself.
Mm-hmm.
Spend time each day. Could be 5 minutes a day. Jesus, I'm not okay. I am so sad about this loss. I hate how this is working out. I don't know what to do about it. I need your help. Simple prayers like that. Prayers of conversation with Jesus. Tell him. Tell
Mm-hmm.
him your sorrows and sadness. And some of that releases the grief. It releases the trauma. It again, grief moves forward. You're not meant to sit in it, right?
Yes.
You cry and then you wipe your tears and you keep going about your day,
Mm-hmm.
right? doesn't make it less sad. It's just the grief isn't sitting there. You're not crying endlessly. I lost a friend one time and I just cried for 3 days straight. Didn't stop crying. And then I stopped. Does it change my friendship? No. Does it make me less sad that she's gone? Absolutely not. I miss her all the time. She died too young. But something bodily, it stopped, right? It
Hmm.
moved forward in a sense and said, okay, Dina, keep going. You got to go back to work. You got to take care of the family. You got to do things. And
Hmm.
I could. So talk about it is the main principle,
Yeah,
right?
get it out. Get it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. For those of you who have been here a while, you've heard me talk about Rise and Source way too much. And if you're new, you can check the links in the show notes for what Dina is talking about. But this is one reason I have loved Frequent so much for my clients because they are struggling with things like grief. They're sad. They're also overwhelmed because there's information everywhere. They're trying all the things and they just don't know what to do. And I'm like, this is the easy button. This is the easy button to help you reset. Yes, we still need to work on like moving our body. We need to work on, emotional support and regulating our nervous system. But this drink that actually tastes good will be the step that gives you the energy to do the rest of what you need to do to heal. And so it's just, yeah, I love that you brought the frequency component into that because I feel like it really is the easy button. When you don't know where to start, you're sad, you're grieving, you're trying all the things, you're overwhelmed with all the information. It's like, go ahead and pour something in your body that's full of minerals, that's full of adaptogens and frequencies that are going to help your body reset. It's just the easiest thing to help you go to the next step, which is so good.
Totally. I had a client yesterday say, well, I don't want to take any shortcuts. And I said, listen, you're
You
gonna run
want this
out of
shortcut.
time in life. You have all these dreams, right? It's like I'm talking about I love root change, right? I'm not saying we're gonna ignore the root. This is not a band-aid.
Hmm.
But it functions like that. It actually
Yes.
goes to the root, right? Immediately, it's realigning your 8 internal organ systems. It starts the second you ingest it. So I said to my client, we're going to do both. We're going to take the
Hmm.
short
Yes.
road and the long road, right? It's like we're going to try both because if it's available, why not try it if it's going to
Yes.
help? And I know people that have four women this past year that have gotten pregnant unexpectedly,
Hmm.
with previous experiences needing infertility assistance in pregnancy, no assistance needed. They just
Hmm.
had frequent products.
Hmm. It's
That's
crazy.
undeniable. You can't
Hmm.
deny that,
Nope.
So those are statistics now in the psychology world. It's like, okay, we have to share this because it's helpful. So it's a wonderful resource, and I'm
Yes.
thrilled it's helped my mental health incredibly. But it's helpful for pregnancy and in grief and sadness.
Yeah. One last question. This was a specific question from a member in our free Facebook group, but they were talking about the fear of grief. So, like, they had a miscarriage, they've been grieving that, they're ready to start trying again, but they're fearful of the grief that they might experience again. Do you have any tips for that? Like, not even just grieving, but just being fearful to grieve.
Yeah, I that makes sense. Fear travels together. So that one what if here has another what if and another what if attached, right? So it just can just skyrocket and take off and take over. My first thought is just go for it anyway. I'm oversimplify it, but in a sense, you want to push through it because there's paralysis that can happen, right? Like fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
If you shut down, you will regret that more. If you stop and freeze and let the fear take over, you will regret that more than if you try it and if you lose again, in a sense, right? That's my first thought. Secondly, talk about it. Same advice every time. Let's, talk through it. Talk to somebody about your fears. A lot of my people that come to me anxious, when I talk it through with them by the end of 50-minute session, not like 50 sessions, like 50 minutes of a session, they're like, okay, I can do this now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I've given them some magic information. It's just we've dismantled the fears or we've come up with coping mechanisms. Like, okay, let's go there. What if you lost the pregnancy and you have another miscarriage? What if? Let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Actually,
that's
like
good.
exposure therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about how are you going to handle it. And so some of them, it's interesting how they come to these light bulb moments themselves. Like, well, I would hate that, but I already know how to do it. I've done it before. Okay, I don't want it to happen. but it's always like it's always a risk when you make decisions in life. You're going to take a risk. So, is there a chance? Are you willing to take the risk, the chance that it might not happen again? You might actually have a baby in your arms
Mm-hmm.
in a year, you know?
Yeah.
And if you have the right support system around you, could you try it again? Could you go there, you know, and not let fear take over? Every page in scripture discusses fear. How do I know that? A professor of mine read every page looking for fear, and he highlighted everywhere it said fear.
Yeah.
Everything that is associated with fear, a story about a fearful person, directly addressing fear, God's command to not fear, whatever it was. The whole thing was highlighted yellow. Why? Because God knows we're scared. We're scared, we're frail, we're delicate, we're little tiny lambs that need a shepherd. So he knows you're afraid. Talk to God about it, talk to your people about it, and go for it. That's what I go for it. Take the chance, because there's a chance you'll end up pregnant and you'll have
Mm-hmm.
a baby. And the sorrows that you had are in your past. There's a chance of that, right? There's always hope.
Yeah. There's always hope. Gosh, that is so good. I know we're wrapping up here, and I'm going to take a second to even just say there's only one thing I disagreed with you on, Dina, and that is when you said like, hopefully you don't have to talk to a counselor. You can just, tell your support group. But like, I disagree. I think the money you spend on talking to someone like you, because even what we have just uncovered in this like 20, 30-minute podcast episode, I'm like, I feel like I'm looking at things a whole different way just from this time. And this wasn't even about me, you know? And I have worked with coaches and life coaches and um, all different kinds and that have called out things in me that I would not have seen myself, that I truly believe that the people in my life would have not seen, that my support group, and I have a fantastic support group. I'm very blessed in that way. But I think there is something so special and so like worth every single penny to work with someone like you that can process stuff with you, unbiased, doesn't have pre-made judgments about you or anything like that, and that can take a 50-minute session and work through a whole thing in 50 minutes. Like you cannot put a price tag on the relief you'll feel, on the physical health you'll experience from working through stuff like that with someone who has tools and not opinions, essentially. Like, of course, you have an opinion, but you know what I mean? Like, just a well streamlined, like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the fear. Let's call this out. Let's look at it this way. I just think it's incredibly, incredibly powerful. So I had to throw that out there. So,
Sweet, Tori. You're right. I mean, you are right. It is, and I have been blessed by great counsel in my
mm,
life. I've
mm,
paid for counseling and I've seen multiple counselors. You're right. And anyone I can help, I'd be happy to. I think I just love it when your people around you really can
mm.
be your nest of feathers, you know,
Yes.
and find hope and support there. And of course, I'm here too.
Yes, I know. So that's what, to wrap us up, Dina, tell us if someone's listening to this and they're like, I need more Dina in my life. I need this kind of emotional support. Where can they find you?
So the World Wide Web, I have a website, my first and last name, dinapreviti.com for counseling, and then Instagram, Dina Prev. And yeah, that just Google me, knock on my door. No, just don't knock on my doors.
They
Yeah.
send you a DM, right? They can knock on your virtual door.
Yes, absolutely. That's always open.
Yes, and I will have Dina's information in the show notes for you guys. And yeah, Dina, thank you so, so much for being here. This was such a wonderful, wonderful topic, and you touched on it so well. So thank you again for being here.
My pleasure. When you said grief, I was like, oh no, I'm going to be the one that makes everyone sad. But I am thrilled for what you're doing, Tori, because so many women and families need what you offer specifically, not just your encouraging personality and your bubbly like presence, demeanor. They also need the skill set and the experience you have. And I mean, you're so well educated on how to help the woman's body. So that combined is a powerhouse. So anyone listening, talk to Tori. I'm going to say the same thing you said, because I mean, you're incredibly helpful and very successful and effective in what you offer women. And you're also every day giving people hope. And so you're giving people hope, but also results. And they're looking for both.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for what you do. Thank you for letting me be a part of it for today and inviting me here and trusting me. And I appreciate you. And I'm so thrilled for what you've started here. And I hope that it continues to grow.
Me too. Thank you so much, Dina.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks for hanging out with me today. If this episode touched your heart or taught you something, I'd be honored if you share it with a friend who could use the information too. And if you want to be the real MVP, then would you also take 30 seconds to tap those 5 stars at the bottom and leave a written review telling me what you're loving? It lights me up to know this podcast is really helping you. Don't forget, you're super cute and super fertile, so meet me back here next week and let's keep chatting and learning together.